and welcome to Newfoundland and Labrador Studies 2205. This is Unit 2, The Roots of Our Culture, Section 6, Lesson 1, and this is Video 1 on the structure of representative government. I'm Miss Fleming, and of course I'm your instructor for this course, so let's get going. Before we begin this section, I wanted to highlight a few things. This section is about the changes in government through the 19th century. It is important to note that these systems of government were forced onto Indigenous peoples as the British colony grew. This period of time saw a lot of change, empowerment, and disempowerment. And it is important to learn about the history of government in order to become more critically aware of politics and civics today. So, the late 1700s into the 1800s saw the move towards democracy in Europe and the Americas. There were growing convictions that humans should be citizens rather than subjects of the monarchy without any say in their future. Some residents of Newfoundland and Labrador held this belief as well. When this period of time began, King George IV was in power in the British monarchy, and then after him was William IV. So let's talk about that move towards representative government. With the growing population of Newfoundland, the permanent European settlers, the need for civil government, took over from naval government. A civil governor was appointed in 1817 by the British, and colonial status was appointed to Newfoundland in 1825, which I believe we mentioned before. The government at this time was the governor and the appointed council. But reformers felt that more reform was needed. They argued that the people should be able to elect representatives to a legislature that would make laws to represent their interests. Patrick Morris, which is the head of the Benevolent Irish Society, blamed many of Newfoundland's problems on despotic British administration, and that representative government was necessary for prosperity. Merchants were divided on the issue, as the cost of a legislature would come with taxes, thus raising the price of producing fish and hurting their profits. But the legislature would keep the British from raising taxes for public works, which did not benefit the fishery. The British House of Commons was reformed in 1832, and the British Parliament passed a bill to grant representative government to Newfoundland at that time. It was seen as a positive move for the British and the Newfoundland economy. The first general election was held in 1832, and the new system came into effect in 1833. There was no premier or prime minister. The head of government was still the governor, who was appointed by the British monarchy, and this was the first representative government governor, and that was Sir Thomas John Cochrane. So let's take a look at this diagram of the structure of representative government. There were two chambers, referred to as the upper house, here in green, and the lower house, in blue. The upper house referred to as the Legislative Council, whose members were appointed by the governor. They held the most important job, such as Chief Justice and Colonial Treasurer. The Executive Council were also members of the Legislative Council, who the governor went to for different decisions. The lower house, referred to as the House of Assembly, whose members were voted in by the public. Now I have that in quotation marks, but I'll go into detail on that on the next slide. Members of the lower house were elected by men, aged 21 and older, who had occupied a house for 1 year prior to the election, so it wasn't really a true representation of the public. Voting was done in public in front of others, as opposed to the current practice of privately casting a ballot. The House of Assembly had 15 members, representing 9 districts. Some districts had more than one member to give a denominational balance. There were no representatives for the French Shore or for Labrador, and their reach was limited, but the House of Assembly did have some influence on issues as they passed bills on to the Legislative Council. So now it's time to continue to the next video, which goes into some issues and some efforts of that government, but make sure to take a break if you need one, and I'll see you in a bit.